Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. Before we get started, wanted to remind everybody to check out the show notes for useful links and check out our website, big4accountingfirms.com. Now, in today's podcast, we have some pretty big news. EY's split up saga continues, and reportedly the individuals with knowledge of the split up have said that partners plan to make, or partners are going to gain a lot if EY splits up. And FT, Wall Street Journal, there's tons of financial websites that are just running with this story. And reportedly, the EY partners could make up to $8 million each if EY splits up. Now, that's a lot of money, so I don't think that would be all the partners. I think that would just be senior partners that make that much. So what are the details of this plan? The firm is hoping to sell about 15% of the consulting business for more than $10 billion. So the market cap would be $10 billion. And this would leave 70% in the hands of its partners. And partners joining the new consulting business are expected to receive shares worth between 7 to 9 times their annual remuneration, potentially reaching a value of $8 million that we spoke about before. And partners in the audit business would be set to receive a cash payout from the initial public offering worth about 2 to 4 times their annual pay under the plan, which would be about $2 million to $850,000 based on the partner's salary. And it says, however, under the current plan, directors and managers below the partner level would only get a token amount under the current plans. And so that would be stock options, things like that, or equity, just stock in general. So everybody below partner would not make that much money. I'm sure EY would throw something in there to keep people happy. And because if you remember, Carmine DeCibio emailed everybody and said, hey, we're doing the best for the employees, whatever that means. And that would be the remaining 15% of equity that we talked about would be reserved for incentives for staff. There's that first 15% that would be for the public, 70% of existing partners, and then 15% for staff. And it also says that EY member firms will vote on the proposal in the fall. And then there are likely to be further changes once they look over that plan, once the member firms look over that plan. And the article also says that it remains unclear how some departments such as tax would be split and whether they would be considered part of audit or consulting. And this is what I spoke about before, because tax is a member of basically both practices. Now, it's a separate practice, but audit cannot perform audits without a tax function. Otherwise, they'd have to outsource their tax audit for every single audit that they do. So it's going to be very complicated. That part's going to be extremely complicated and confusing. And that's what I said in previous podcasts. And that's why I think this deal is unlikely to happen. It's going to be very confusing. It's going to take time. And I don't know if that's something that EY is thinking about. That part's going to be very confusing, and that part, I think they would have to work out that's something that has to be worked out over the next few months, if they haven't already worked it out. And another reason I think this might not happen is the company intends to borrow about $17 billion with some of the money needed to pay the audit partners, that people said. So it's going to be really hard. It's a bad market to borrow money in right now. It's a bad market to go public in. But the problem is EY could wait to go public later for this small piece. But if they were long-term thinking, because they could get more money in a later time period. The problem is, as we said in the previous podcast, is that the partners are greedy, especially the senior partners, because they're closer to retirement. And if you could get $8 million today, like, are you kidding me? You're going to take that. These people aren't private equity investors. They're partners who look year to year in basically every metric that they have. And so I think they might push towards this. And I think E&Y could potentially shoot themselves in the foot in multiple ways. I guess that's shooting yourself in the foot multiple times because of this tax practice is one example of that. Splitting that up is going to be a headache. Splitting up from consulting is going to be a headache. Putting audit on its own is going to be a complete headache. So I think what would happen if you were going to do this is you would just split audit off completely and leave them to grow their own tax practice. Maybe there's some tax partners that want to get paid out and go with them. It's going to have to be E&Y audit just goes off on its own, and then they start their own tax and consulting practice, which would definitely happen again. There'd probably be a period where they had to wait before they build up the consulting practice again, but it would naturally happen, as it will naturally happen that they build their own tax practice. But the details are yet to be worked out. And E&Y and their CEO has already responded to this, and I'll cover that in tomorrow's podcast. So make sure to subscribe to this podcast to stay up to date on that. But I think this thing is progressing, and whoever's close to this, which we've said we think it's Goldman Sachs because they're the most involved in this, it keeps leaking. So people, and I think it's probably them in collaboration with some partners in E&Y that are trying to push this thing over the finish line. And this would be a big payout for Goldman Sachs as well, or any investment bank involved in this. To be honest, it's just a huge payout for them. So that's probably why they're pushing this. I think E&Y is losing control of this. I think Carmen DeCibio is losing control of this. We covered that one article where supposedly Kelly Greer is leaving because she didn't get along with Carmen DeCibio, and some people weren't satisfied with him, Carmen DeCibio, the CEO, the global CEO of E&Y, and Kelly Greer is the U.S. CEO. And reportedly, they didn't get along, and some people don't like Carmen DeCibio as CEO, so they're using this to push him out. And frankly, his response to this and the way he's acted around this, I think warrants him potentially getting kicked out. But it's going to be very interesting. I still am on the fence about, well, I'm not on the fence because in that previous podcast, I said I don't think this is going to happen in this market. Especially they're saying, oh, we're going to vote on this in the autumn. Well, by the time that rolls around, we're going to be in a very unique place from an economic standpoint, a global economic standpoint. And I don't think this will make sense from any perspective by then. But that's where I am. I'm fully aware that I can be proven horribly wrong in the future, but make sure to subscribe to this podcast to figure out whether I'm right or wrong and to figure out E&Y's response. Thanks for listening.